This is the area. This part right here is all mapped. Was mapped, I believe, in the 50s. It has all the garden beds and all the smaller mounds and things that we'll walk over there and see. This is part of that 60 Islands locale that has a bunch of oral histories. There's even some of these, I believe those other islands down the road here have burials on those islands of our ancestors. Across the street or across the river is we have some garden beds. We have a sturgeon weir that's on the other side over there. What people don't understand, I think, is when you look at this area on the map, you know, it only gives you this little bitty box, and you're only looking in this little box, and you don't see the grand scheme of things, and that everything from the mouth of the Menominee River all the way up this river is all one big site, you know, that our people have lived on for thousands and thousands of years. So that's one of the major things that we're trying to show is that these things are all connected. Not only were we here on this Michigan side, but we're also on the Wisconsin side as well. This place was studied pretty extensively back in the 50s. I think the lady's name, Marla Buckmaster, Dr. Marla Buckmaster did a lot of work here. She mapped everything. She had a couple test units put in. There's other archaeologists that have came a little bit before that and after that. In the 60s, they removed some bodies out of the mounds that we're going to kind of go through right now. They call this location right here the Backlund Mound Group. And as we move down the river, there's another mound group that's you could probably throw a stone and hit the other mound. They call it the White Rapids. This one's called the White Rapids, and then the other one's called the Backlund Mound Group. And they separated them because people that lived on the other side owned that particular area, the Backlund family, and they called it that. But it's really one big complex. So we could probably move over here and take a look.
So one of the problems, like the guy was saying, is you know, the archaeology community and others want to segment these things into saying, you know, here's a site, here's a site, here's a site. But what we know is this is a cultural landscape where this exists, and there's stuff in between the two as well. So when people look at Native American and specifically Menominee type landscapes like this, and they don't talk to us and you know, get our information from us, you have somebody else telling us what's important to us. And you know, that's why these consultations and these other things are so important, is to really understand what's here and then make a decision after you understand what's here, not make the decision and say we'll figure out what's there later. So it's common sense to talk to the people whose landscape it is.
Can you talk a little bit about Aquila and some of the investors and some of the stuff, some of the information you've kind of shared, just so that people understand some of the history to this company that's also worked in other indigenous places, and there's a history there that people don't hear about?
Yes, so Hudbay Minerals and Aquila originally had at one point in the past had formed, I believe it was called Back 40 Joint Ventures, and over time there was an agreement where Aquila bought out Hudbay Minerals through some type of a transaction, and at this point Hudbay owns somewhere around 12 to 14%. I can't quite remember. They just released a new April investor presentation, so there's some new numbers in there. But Hudbay Minerals still owns a portion of the company, the exploratory company, Aquila, and the exploration that's happening up here. But you know, Hudbay Minerals has some human rights issues in the past with one of their projects down in Guatemala. It was through a subsidiary company, but it was Hudbay Minerals, and you know, they're going through some litigation up in Canada, and you know, facing a lot of public scrutiny and other types of scrutiny for their actions down in Guatemala. the employees, and some of the allegations, I would say now, because I don't claim to know what all happened, or potentially some abuses against indigenous women down there by their workers, as well as you know kind of a potential assassination of one of the opposition leaders down there. So these things are all public information that people can find out, and we don't know anything more than what we're reading in the public record as well, with respect to Hud Bay and their situation down in Guatemala.
Yeah, one of the other things too is that when Hud Bay was involved in this project, I mean, in a bigger, I think they owned 51% of the stock at that time. They never submitted a permit in the whole time that they were working with them, with Aquila. So when they got into kind of their human rights trouble, they had pulled out of the project, and this thing went stalemate for about 3 years, up until December of 2015, when Aquila had submitted the permit on its own. So they're not a mining company. They'd never mined ever. They're an exploratory company. Most of us think that they're going to use this permit to kind of dangle it as a carrot in front of some of the bigger mining companies.
And what kind of dangers come with that to this sacred land, to these ancestral lands, with regards to the location of the mine, but also regards to the other things that come along with mining, regarding maybe roads and traffic and that side of things?
Well, I think if anybody's been around a mine and seen the truck traffic, to the dust and the dirt and the blasting and all those things, they're going to be right next to our mounds. We're right here. The mine's just going to be right down that road a little ways, and I don't know anybody that would want a mine of this size and trucks and the blasting and all that thing right next to a cemetery.
Absolutely. And what size is the mine?
The mine itself, I believe, is 650 acres.
Somewhere
Total?
in there, it kind of keeps changing.
Yeah.
As they're modifying things. They don't have their final plans, so a lot of times when we get asked the real specifics, it changes a little bit. So we'll just put that caveat in there that we're going off of information that's been submitted, and they're potentially trying to get these land swaps and things, and how that would change the size of things. It's kind of a moving target on that question, but the footprint of the mine would be fairly large, and the project area, that's a different definition, and then the open pit itself. So the open pit itself, full crater in the earth, it was designed to be somewhere around 750 feet deep, which is about 2.5 Statue of Liberties stacked on top of one another, and 2,000 feet wide by 2,500 feet wide. So you're talking 5.5 football fields, end zone to the end zone, wide. It's pretty large, hole in the ground that isn't here now. So
that's American football, right?
Yeah. So when you're talking, what are the dangers associated with this? Is mining, it can prospectively look at things and say what they think is going to happen. Nobody actually knows, because they haven't went 2.5 football fields down into the earth here to understand how the rock formations, how the underground aquifers, how all of these things will react to that type of disruption to the earth. So there can be all of the studies they want on saying we're going to put these protections in place, and this is how everything's going to react to one another. But we know often what's submitted on mines isn't what comes out at the other end. They will say it's their best guess, but they're not going to make a bad guess. They have no motivation to make a bad guess about what's going to happen. So
Absolutely. And just so people understand a bit more, I mean, if we look in the background here, you've got the Menominee River. And can you speak just very briefly what the Menominee Nation's creation story is? Just really briefly, for people to understand the difference between maybe the Menominee Nation, who have never had a story of leaving the land and going to different land, from that aspect for people.
Yeah, so this, like I kind of talked about before, this thing is a landscape. This is just a small little inkling. These mounds right here, and these garden beds are really just a small glimpse of a much bigger complex that our people have lived on for thousands of years. And you go down this river, about 42 river miles, is the actual mouth of our Menominee River, where that first Menominee bear came out of the earth there and became the first Menominee, and it called to its brother, the eagle, to come down and join it. I hear my dog's barking.
The wolf didn't come till a little bit after the eagle.
And then that's, as they proceeded up the river, other clans came and formed the 5 principal clans of the Menominee Nation. We've been here, like I said, longest living inhabitants of Wisconsin. We don't have a migration story. We migrated up this river. Maybe that's our migration story. 42 river miles, that's what we migrated. And now we're currently about 60 miles, southwest from here, where our current reservation is. Where we were originally too.
Yeah.
Right.
So when you talk about the creation story, so as Guy was saying, at the beginning of that creation story happened at the mouth of the river, and there are stories all the way up the river. So Menominee within the total clan society structure has 34 different clans, which there's 5 main clans, and then there's sub-clans of those clans. And a lot of those came from the river, and the stories came from those clans walking up the river and taking on other, beings as their brothers and sisters, and those becoming part of the Menominee original clan structure. So, the sturgeon is a big portion of what's in the Menominee River, and that's one of our clans that got taken in as a brother to the original bear and the eagle and on down the line. And that stuff happened here on the Menominee River. So our creation started down at the mouth, but this whole landscape is where all of these things played out in our history. And not that we need external validation of this, but some of the early contacts with Jesuit and other missionaries and early government officials, they've documented this hundreds of years ago, that this is what Menominee believes. So you may hear out there some people, oh, that's a nice story Menominee's making up to try to stop this mine. And we've always thought about the future, but a couple hundred years ago we didn't make up some story knowing that there would be a potential mine here a couple hundred years later. So this is something that we believe, and we know it, and there's a lot of other external validation or verification of that, and not that we need it, we know what our history is, but a lot of times the outside world wants to know what other proof is there of it. So
Absolutely. Well, now you brought the outside world in, I guess just to finish up, to ask you, what can people that are out there do? How can they get involved? Where can they go to find information? And what would you like them to do to be your allies in this and let you lead this battle, but they walk along your side and help you defeat this?
Yes, so there's a lot of different ways that people can get involved, and there's a lot of different ways. Menominee specifically, we have specific concerns with some of the landscape and the cultural and historical, religious value of it. But there's a lot of other property owners up and down this river. If this mine breaches or pollutes, what happens to their property values? Different people are opposed to this mine for different reasons. So one of the things we like to encourage people to do is get educated on it and make your own decision. So we don't expect people to wholesale buy hook, line, and sinker what we're saying, just like we don't expect them to accept what the company is saying. So we ask people to have an open mind and take the time to understand it yourself and then make a decision. Some people may end up being for the mine for their own reasons, and that's not up to us to judge, but we believe that once the people actually understand the significance and the threats that are associated with this, that most people are making up their mind now to say, why would you put this mine there? And that includes what happened earlier today down in Stevenson Island. There's a lot of people are just now hearing about this, and they're just floored once they actually start getting some of the facts of things. So the company has a PR firm, like many of these projects. They drive home a specific narrative that they want to control the message in the narrative that's out there. And what people are starting to understand and wake up to is that this narrative has a specific intention, which is to influence how the public thinks about it. So now that some of this other information is coming in, people are getting awoken, and a lot more people are getting involved. So www.noback40.org is the tribe-specific website that has some information about it. But there's a lot of other groups up here too, local citizens. There's a lot of groups that are opposed to it for their own reasons. So, depending on where people sit on that spectrum of why they, potentially would oppose it or support it even, there's different sources of information out there.
Excellent, thank you. And
I
Guy,
also think I just wanted to add to that is, that people should be getting knowledgeable about what sulfide mining is and what it does to the environment. Go to your tap water and connect with that water that's there, and how crucial and important it is to your everyday lives. And it's being aware, of those things in your life.
thank you very much.